Okay, so today we're going to talk about Language Paper 2, question 3. It's the language analysis question for Paper 2, and if you have already seen my video on Language Paper 1, question 2, it's marked in the same way, so you might want to go back and pick up some tips from that, but I'm going to go through this because there are some slight differences that you are going to need to know in order to make sure you get the maximum amount of marks for Language Paper 2, question 3. So for AQA's Language Paper 2, we've got two sources, they're about A4 long, and they are both non-fiction sources. One of them from about the Victorian era, some of them have been from the early 1900s or the 1800s, around there, and generally one source from the 21st century, although it could be a slightly different source. But generally they're supposed to be an older source and a more modern source, and they're supposed to be about real events, non-fiction, right? You've got 4 questions. Question 1 is on true or false, so a list of statements that are true and false about one of the sources. You've got question 2 where you're comparing inferences between the two sources. Question 3 where you're analysing language, and then question 4 where you are comparing the viewpoints and opinions of the writers. And question 3, we've got to the point, so they go up in 4-mark increments, right? So we've got 4 marks for the first question, 8 marks for the second question, 12 marks for this one for question 3, and then 16 marks for question 4. Now, there are certain things that you're going to have to do if you want to get up to the top level marks in analysing language. If we look at the mark scheme, again, this mark scheme is exactly the same as the mark scheme for Language Paper 1, question 2, which is also the analysing language question. But the mark scheme wants you to do a couple of things. First off, if you want to get up to the top level marks, so if you're getting 10, 11, 12 marks, then you want to be trying to be detailed and perceptive. Now, I'm going to give you some hints on how to be detailed and perceptive later on. Detail, you just want to explain in as much detail as possible. I'll give you some ways of doing that. Perceptive, there's a few different ways of doing that. And I'm going to show you as we sort of go through. In the mark scheme, it also says you've got to do 3 things, right? And these 3 things are kind of universal across all of the mark bands. Whatever you're doing, you've got to try and do these things. You've got to analyse the effect of the writer's choice of language. Now, this means the writer has written in a particular way. They've written about a particular topic or a particular subject in a particular way, and they're trying to get an effect on you. So they're trying to get you to feel a particular way or think a particular way. They're trying to create an effect in you. So you have to try and tell me what that effect is, what they're trying to get you to think or feel. Right? They ask you to use a judicious range of textual detail, which means using quotations. Judicious means you're picking the best quotations, and by textual detail we mean short, precise quotations. That's what we're going for to prove your answers. And they also want sophisticated and accurate use of subject terminology. Now, this means you have to be able to say what techniques are being used, right? So what sorts of verbs are being used, what sorts of adjectives are being used, what sorts of similes, what sorts of metaphors that are creating those effects that are making you feel a particular way. Right. Now, generally, question 3 is going to be about your older source, your Victorian source. So the language is going to be a little bit more complicated than in paper 1, which is one of the key differences. What you've got to do with any Victorian piece of language that you're looking at, right, is be as positive as possible. Look for stuff that you do understand. The examiners are told to mark positively. They're looking to give you marks. They're not looking to take things away if you get stuff wrong. They're looking to give you marks. So look for the words and phrases you do understand, and then try and say something about that. Right, let's have a look at a question, shall we? An example question. So this is on a source which is about First World War soldiers, right? So we're talking 1915, First World War soldiers arriving into London at Victoria Station on a train, okay? And the question 3 for this one is, you now need to refer only to source A from lines 22 to 29. How does the writer use language to describe the soldiers? Now, first tip and trick here, which is again different to paper 1, make sure you are looking at the right source. I know loads of people who have gone in and just read the question quickly and then analysed a section of totally the wrong source, got no marks for this question. Make sure you read the question carefully. Once you've got that question, line 22 to 29, what you want to do is go back to the source and draw a couple of little lines on the source from 22 to 29, so you know that's the section that I'm looking at. Then you're going to read it. Hopefully, if you've looked at my video on annotating sources for Language Paper 2, hopefully you've done some annotation already on this source, but you want to spend a couple of minutes just annotating in a little bit more detail, okay? So if we have a look at this bit, here's the little extract. I'm going to ask you to pause the video and just read it. So hopefully you've paused the video there and you've read that little extract so you know what's going on in it. I'm going to show you how I'd annotate that extract. Now, if you look, I've got a couple of bullet points over on the left-hand side here. We're going to ignore those for now because I did those last, okay? As I was reading, I'm circling and underlining any words or phrases that I think are having an effect on me, making me think something or making me feel something. And particularly because the question was about the soldiers, I want to do it about the soldiers. So as I'm reading, I want to look for stuff about the soldiers. So in this first line, in one instant, the doors flew open and strange objects poured out. The bits I've gone for here are, we've got, first off, they're called objects. So they're not people, right? Which makes them a little bit odd and unusual. We've got a strange, unusual adjective. Strange is used a few different times in this extract, right? And I've underlined that a few different times. So by using that adjective, it makes them seem particularly peculiar or odd or strange, right? And also the fact that they poured out. Could have chosen any verb there, right? So strange objects walked out or like flew out, or if they pour out, it suggests they're slightly sort of chaotic and there's lots of them and all that kind of thing. So that's what we're looking for. Subtleties of what does this word make me think particularly about these people? And if you look through, what I've tried to do is cover all of the source. And there aren't any sections of that little extract where I haven't got an annotation, but I haven't annotated every single word, right? I am looking for short quotations, and I'm looking when I annotate them to come up with effect. What do they make me think or feel? Once I've done that, I'm going to try and pick 2 overall things that I think about the soldiers. And that's where my bullet points come in. So I've said they are strange and damaged. I've got 2 different levels to my answer. That helps me get to that perceptive thing from our mark scheme earlier on. Okay, so they're not just strange and unusual. They are also damaged. Right, and we get that from things like they are weather worn and weather beaten and things like that in the quotations. So now when I come to write it, if I want to get up to my detailed and perceptive, what I need to do is put both of those bits in. Perceptive means I'm looking at it with a bit of subtlety. I'm not just saying they're a bit weird. They are strange and they're also damaged. That's a more subtle, more sophisticated idea. It's got 2 different layers to it. I'm going to use lots of these short quotations. So not just the fact that they use the adjective strange. If you just said they use the word strange a lot and therefore they're strange, you're not really getting into a lot of detail. They use the adjective strange and they repeat it a lot, which makes you think that they are particularly unusual, but also they're referred to as objects. They're not actually people, which makes them seem particularly unusual and peculiar. Okay. Again, notice the vocabulary I'm using here. I'm not just saying strange. I'm trying to go for more sophisticated vocabulary, so peculiar rather than strange. That's going to help you get up to perceptive, right? So once I've got my 2 bullet points, when I write my answer, all I do is say, the soldiers are presented as being strange and damaged, and then I prove it with a bunch of detail, use as much quotation as I can, use some of those techniques, the adjectives, the verbs that are being used in there. That's how I'm going to get up to top level marks.